The moment the man's knees hit the dirt, the small white headstone shuddered with the sound of it, and the boy beside him flinched as if the ground itself had been struck. The father pressed his forehead to the grass, hands trembling, breath torn out of his chest in daylight that felt too bright for grief, and that was when the woman standing a few steps away felt her heart stop because the name carved into the stone was the name of the husband she had buried twice in her mind and never truly let go of. If you're watching Broken Smill and you believe in hope, compassion, and second chances, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe, because stories like this live on through hearts that still believe. The cemetery lay on a gentle hillside, washed in pale winter sun, the sky a soft blue that felt almost cruel in its calm. Rowan Hale had come early, as he always did, before the city woke fully, before the noise could intrude on the quiet ritual he shared with his son. Theo stood close to his father, small hands tucked into the pockets of a worn jacket, eyes fixed on the simple marker that read Jonah Hale, beloved husband and father. Rowan's body shook in a way he had learned to hide everywhere else, but here, in the open daylight, the grief was heavier. He had not cried when Jonah died. He had not cried when the doctors told him there was nothing more to do. He cried now, years later, because the world had kept moving without permission, and he was so tired of being strong for a child who still asked why the sky was blue and why some people didn't come back. Maribel Cross had arrived with a black sedan and a driver who waited at a respectful distance, her heels sinking slightly into the earth as she walked. The billionaire's life was built on glass towers, controlled meetings, and silence that cost money, but here, the quiet pressed against her chest until it hurt. She had come to finally let go of a man she believed had chosen a different life over her, a man she had loved so fiercely that losing him had reshaped her into someone colder, sharper, more untouchable. Seeing another man collapsed at Jonah's grave tore something open inside her, something raw and unexpected. The child's presence made it worse, made it real in a way she had never allowed herself to imagine. Rowan lifted his head slowly, wiping his face with the back of his hand, ashamed of the weakness even though no one had told him to be. He noticed the woman then, standing still as if carved from the same stone as the markers around her. She was elegant in a way that did not belong here, her posture composed, her expression caught between disbelief and devastation. For a moment, they simply existed in the same space, bound by a name and a silence that felt too heavy for strangers. Theo looked up at her with curious eyes, unaware of the storm unraveling inside her, and that innocent gaze struck Maribel harder than any accusation ever could. The years fell back on her like a tide. Jonah had disappeared from her life during a time when everything felt negotiable and nothing felt permanent. She had believed he left because she had chosen ambition over tenderness, because she had been too busy building an empire to notice the man who wanted a simpler life. She never knew about the illness, the quiet marriage, the child born into a world already preparing to say goodbye. Standing there now, she saw the life Jonah had lived without her, and it was nothing like the betrayal she had imagined. It was small, fragile, brave. Rowan sensed something in the air shift, an invisible thread pulling tight. He felt exposed, protective instincts flaring as he straightened, one hand resting on Theo's shoulder. Life had taught him to expect judgment when people saw his circumstances, the single father label, the pity that came with it. But what he saw in Maribel's eyes wasn't pity. It was recognition, and that frightened him more than anything else. The day unfolded slowly after that, the sun climbing higher, shadows moving across the grass as if time itself were trying to pass gently. Maribel remained nearby, unable to leave, her presence both intrusive and necessary. She watched Rowan talk softly to Theo, pointing out birds, explaining death in careful fragments that wouldn't break a child's heart too soon. She noticed the way Rowan's shoulders curved inward, the weight he carried not just for himself but for a boy who needed stability more than answers. For the first time since Jonah vanished from her life, Maribel allowed herself to imagine the man he had become in his final years, and it humbled her. Rowan, in turn, felt the pull of her attention, the unspoken connection humming between them. He had loved Jonah deeply, in a way that had cost him friends, family approval, and eventually, everything. Their life together had been quiet and hard-won, full of late-night talks and hospital corridors, laughter squeezed into moments stolen from fear. After Jonah's death, Rowan had rebuilt himself from fragments, teaching himself how to exist in daylight without the person who had been his anchor. Seeing Maribel stirred something he thought was long buried, not desire, but the ache of being seen for the fullness of his past rather than the narrow present. As the hours passed, the cemetery grew busier, then quieter again, the world moving in cycles that didn't pause for grief. Maribel finally stepped closer to the grave, reading the inscription with trembling focus, committing it to memory as if it were a confession she needed to carry. She realized then that her wealth, her influence, had insulated her from loss in ways she never questioned, and now it felt obscene. Jonah had lived his final years without her resources, without her protection, and yet he had built something enduring in love rather than money. That truth reshaped her understanding of success in a way no boardroom ever had. Rowan watched her kneel, careful and reverent, and something inside him softened. He had expected anger if this woman was connected to Jonah's past, expected a confrontation that would reopen wounds he had barely learned to live with. Instead, he felt a strange sense of relief, as if a missing chapter of Jonah's story had finally found its place. Theo edged closer, curiosity winning over shyness, and Maribel smiled at him through tears she no longer tried to hide. In that smile, Rowan saw a possibility he had never considered, that grief could be shared without diminishing the love that came before. The afternoon light grew warmer, casting gold across the stones, and with it came a quiet shift. Maribel understood that honoring Jonah meant honoring the life he chose, not the one she wished he had lived. Rowan understood that Jonah's past did not threaten their love, it expanded it, gave it context and depth. And Theo, sensing the easing of tension, laughed at a butterfly that landed briefly on the grave, as if life itself were offering permission to breathe again. Near the end of this story, if it's touching something deep inside you, please support it. Your encouragement helps keep stories like this alive. Before the final moments unfold, take a second to comment and share what this story made you feel. The day ended without grand gestures or promises, just three people standing in sunlight, connected by loss and the fragile beginnings of understanding. Maribel left the cemetery changed, carrying with her a resolve to honor Jonah not with money or power, but with presence, with humility, with a willingness to step into a life she once misunderstood. Rowan and Theo watched her go, the wind lifting the grass around the grave as if in quiet farewell. Rowan knelt once more, but this time his posture was different, still heavy, but steadier, grounded in the knowledge that love does not vanish when people do. It transforms, it weaves new paths, it waits patiently for hearts brave enough to follow. And as father and son walked away hand in hand, the daylight followed them, gentle and forgiving, reminding anyone watching that even in the aftermath of loss, there are second chances waiting to be recognized.